It was the 1970s. The world was divided by the Iron Curtain, and the situation was as hot as it could get. Over-the-horizon radar waiting for a signal, ballistic missiles and strategic bombers armed and ready for a strike at first call. In the real world, all those crises are over, thankfully. But let's use our imagination for a few minutes and assume that someone did make a mistake that changed the whole situation back then. What would be happening on the battlefields of the Third World War, the nuclear one? It's not an idle question. The militaries of the world were prepping for the worst-case scenario for decades, having large-scale tests and asking the best scientists to work on it. Today, however, we'd like to limit the scope of this question. What would happen to armored vehicles in this case? Do they stand any chance of surviving and fulfilling their combat mission? Well, let's start with the obvious. A huge mushroom and a shockwave devastating everything in its path isn't something we should worry much about. There's no reason to doubt that the primary targets for nuclear strikes are large strategic objects. So no one's chasing a few IFVs out in the open with a couple of nuclear bombs on their backs. Moreover, no one's even keeping tank forces around areas where they can be wiped out in the first few hours of a conflict. A nuclear war is a war of maneuvering. Once the alarm sounds, the armor gets out in the open lest its survival chances are close to nil. Of course, it doesn't mean that armor and nuclear explosions would never meet. Besides huge strategic nuclear warheads, there's also tactical weaponry, missiles, rockets, smaller bombs, still very efficient against mobile tank units. Tactical nuclear weaponry is orders of magnitude smaller, but still dangerous. Here's a powerful explosion of a conventional bomb. If you were lucky enough to be outside the epicenter, avoid the shrapnel and the blast wave, you can relax. The worst is already behind. With a nuclear blast, though, the worst is still ahead. As soon as it goes off, the devastating EM pulse destroys all kinds of active electronics in the vicinity. Civilian machines are pretty much cooked after that, but military equipment usually provides some redundancy. With redundant control systems, the crew can at least leave the contaminated area. For instance, the Leopard 2 is equipped with an emergency system for engine starting and gear shifting. Now, a nuclear strike produces electromagnetic radiation in a wide range of frequencies. While metal can provide some protection from the light and heat, the ionizing radiation is way trickier to hide from. Armor cannot reliably safeguard living beings from a stream of neutrons, so engineers invented armor radiation liners. They weren't perfect, but they reduced the rads soaked up by the crew. Fuel is another thing that can absorb some radiation. All of a sudden, the driver's seat in the T-64 that seemed a bit ridiculous being squeezed between two fuel tanks now makes a little more sense. The next thing that comes with the explosion is the blast wave and secondary adverse factor: rocks, debris, trees, and other projectiles. That's where we have some good news. A sturdy hull, strong armor, and a low profile are all helpful. But the explosion would also bring up a whole cloud of radioactive dust capable of filling the smallest of gaps. Fortunately, the engineers found a solution for that, too. Make the tanks airtight. Compressors can pass the air through special filters and create overpressure inside the machine. So, with a bit of luck, the tank can survive the blast and escape the contaminated area, and his crew will be spending some hours cleaning the radioactive dust off it. Still, the machine remains dangerous for the crew even after cleaning. Neutron radiation creates induced radioactivity, meaning the tank's armor itself becomes a source of radiation. Aluminium alloys used in armored personnel carriers and the like are especially dangerous. Moreover, tank tracks are rich in manganese, and a nuclear blast makes them so radioactive that half an hour next to one will leave anyone with a severe disability. We're so happy that the Cold War never led to this scenario in real life, and we'd like to finish this story with a quote from Albert Einstein. "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones."